Welcome to the Make Work Not Suck podcast.
Your office is not an island. It is a mirror of our society. The political divide here in America is spilling into offices everywhere, and it's making work toxic, tense, and sometimes just unbearable.
Oh, this is going to be good. Today we're asking, has our political divide poised the workplace? Is your cubicle neighbor your ideological enemy? Stick around because we are diving into why politics might be the real reason work sucks right now.
I think this is such an important topic for right now, exploring how polarized politics impacts the workplace, right? Impacts the office. Today we're going to cover things like LGBTQ in conservative areas, the anxiety of government workers during chaotic administrations, the toxic undercurrent of xenophobia, and whether or not workplaces can actually remain neutral or, God forbid, even healthy in this kind of climate.
And Daniel, I know as much as we like to vent, we're not going to just vent today. We're going to share how leaders and employees can navigate this chaos without losing their minds.
Yeah, this is not the Work Sucks podcast. This is the Make Work Not Suck podcast. So we're going to talk about what's bad, but then we're going to talk about what to do about it as well.
Work sucks. I know.
Work sucks. I know.
We need to get that as a little button we can play. Plays a little clip in the background. What we got? 90 seconds or 30 seconds we can play without paying royalties.
Sure. Blink 82. If you're listening, we want to use your song without having to pay royalties because we're doing this on the cheap. All right. So if you're new to the Make Work Not Suck podcast, my name is Daniel Steer. I'm here with my good friend Ryan Hodges. And between the two of us, we have spent years, decades, even as founders, executives, coaches, consultants, working with organizations to help them deal with tough issues. We help people every day from a variety of different roles and a variety of different seats build healthier, more effective workplaces that make the world a better place and make work not suck for their employees.
Yeah, we've navigated hundreds of workplaces through political upheaval, polarizations, and cultural tensions. Trust us, we have seen it and managed it all.
Yep.
All right. So the reality divide in your office. All right, one listener on a comment, this was from a couple episodes ago. We had a listener that came in and said, tune in to Fox News, Newsmax, then CNN or NBC. It's two entirely different worlds, and those worlds collide every day at work. That comment nailed the problem. Our divided realities are following us to work. I mean, when we're sitting there doing an episode about, I think this was the disconnect and the detachment at work. And the user comes in or the listener comes in and says, watch these two polarizing news networks. And then that collides at work. That's such a reality check of how do you even leave that at the door? Can we leave it at the door? How much is this political divide that we see in our country making work suck?
When the news determines who you can trust in your office, I think your company culture is pretty broken.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Oh, your news channel determines who you trust in your office.
Yeah.
We sunk to that level.
I think we have. I really think we have. But here's the tricky part is that I don't know if and how workplaces can stay neutral because employees aren't neutral, right? We all bring our experiences and our hurts and our pains and our backgrounds to work with us. And so employees aren't neutral. But what do companies do when you're bringing a bunch of people from a variety of backgrounds, a variety of different contexts and expectations, and how do you bring them together and actually get them moving forward in a world that seems to be hell-bent on dividing everything? Should companies step in and make a statement, kind of take a stand, or should they just avoid the topic altogether and stay away from politics?
That is a tough question. When you're saying that, it made me think, back in, I say the day, before COVID, maybe I'm going back to 2010, 2008, somewhere in there. You'd walk into an office and they'd have CNN or Fox News on. You didn't really think much of
Right.
it. But
Hmm.
now, if you walk into a building and you see Fox News on, what assumptions are you making?
Yeah, it's the news channel that you choose is a statement about who you are and what you believe.
So, if you are an employee and that votes one way or leans one way or has one belief, and you walk into your employment office every day or your work environment, and I guess this is more if you're going into an office and
Right.
there's, CNN or Fox News, whatever the opposite of whatever one you believe in, like
Hmm.
that's going to be a little frustrating.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Or do you just go with like BBC and just be like, give the middle finger to both parties?
I mean, it is actually rather fun to watch some of the more worldly news networks make fun of
Right.
everything in American politics. So it actually turns into a comedy show, but yeah,
Right.
that's not what most people have on, right?
We kind of deserve that, but
Well, let's take it a step further, though. There have been meetings that I've been in over the past several weeks, and I mean, it's always been there, but I think it's gotten worse, especially since the inauguration, where
yeah.
there are, in these complete remote companies, there's political statements being made, like
Hmm.
why decisions are being made. And in some cases, it's pro the current president. In some cases, it's negative the current president. And you've got to divide in the room. And when a leader is making a political statement about the current president, it it creates conflict and like people not wanting to be in the meeting, and it disconnects people.
Right.
So how do we navigate that?
I would maybe add to that and just say, I think one of the most important things that a leader can do is embrace reality, right? Like we can't deny reality as leaders and and retain the respect of our people. So you have to be honest about what's going on. But there's two completely different interpretations of what reality is right now. And that's been growing over the last couple of years. But how does a leader or an executive, a business owner, a CEO, like how do you craft a shared understanding of reality for your people, for your organization, when there are two completely different interpretations of what is happening right now? That's tough.
I'm going to throw something out there. I think it's where I've been very frustrated in this current political divide, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll use tariffs as an example.
Sure.
Is I think the landscape is there's a lot of unknown, and there are companies that are working on both sides of it. I
Yep.
think where it becomes to an inappropriate level, especially for a leader, is when the decisions become a personal attack on their voting choice. Look, I'm
Hmm.
okay talking about tariffs. Nobody knows where this is going or the impact it's going to happen, and we need to make
Right.
real world decisions about it. But when you start just explaining your political stance and why the individual is a horrible human being, you're bringing your personal politics into a business decision that's just irrelevant. I
Right.
don't care if you like or hate the current president. It is what it is until he's not. So
Right.
all we can do is as a business is we can make sound business decisions about the environment we know. And when you're bringing your political stance, whether you're for or against it, it doesn't really matter. And I think that's what we have to check at the door. I think it's okay
Hmm.
to find out how the policies are going to impact, make the
Hmm.
decisions for the business. I'm not saying just put your head in the sand. Don't bring your personal politics to the business table about why something is or isn't. Again, if you want to go have a beer after hours with somebody or you want to BS on personal time about politics, like that's you do that on personal time. But don't bring negative politics into it. I'm even okay if people want to debate stances or things like that. If you go
Sure.
into pure curiosity, you don't believe in the current president, but you want to understand what the policy means from someone that does believe it, that's healthy. That's curiosity, seeking to understand, wanting to learn. But when you come in with a judgmental bias to the
Hmm.
conversation, you already determined that everybody else needs to believe what you do, or you're going to let that out there. That's actually a form of discrimination. That's segregation. That's bias. I mean, that's all the negative culture components.
One of the things that, I mean, this is a very real conversation for me with a current client. I think scenario planning, if managed well, could be a helpful way to help employees navigate this cultural division, right? To say, okay, let's imagine for a second that this happens, right? I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but let's just assume that, path A happens, right? We're going to come in a second to path B, and then we're going to go to path C. And I'm not saying if I'm for or against path A, B, or C, or how likely they are to happen, none of those things. Let's just assume for a moment that this happens. What impact would that have on our business? And I've had to do that recently because I'm working with a client right now, and one of their high potential people is an H-1B visa worker, and she needs her H-1B visa renewed, or she's not going to be able to work here anymore. And regardless of what you believe is good or bad for America, that's important for this business. That's important for my client. And so, and I knew that there was a risk that things were going to change there. And so I had to get ahead of that and get the paperwork in as quickly as possible for the sake of the business. Whether or not I agree with the politics or disagree is somewhat irrelevant. For the good of the business, we know that this is a risk. We know that when Trump comes into office, all of the immigration laws are up for discussion. And so she's important to this business. We've got to get that done as ASAP. And I wonder if there's an opportunity for leaders to kind of abstract the, hey, I love you, right? You're entitled to your opinion. But at this moment, I don't care what you think. We all need to think about the business and what does the business need. And that's an opportunity, I think, for people to begin to put on a different pair of glasses and look at the situation and maybe come to a different conclusion than they would come to personally.
Yeah, I agree. Let's bring this back into the spicy take you threw out a minute ago. When the news channel determines who you trust in your office, your company culture is broken. I think it's when you bring that political bias about the current political landscape and you're creating disruption in the business. But that's not the only one. That just happens to be the current one. I think there's a couple of different divides here. I mean, how about LGBTQ plus in a Midwestern state? Let's go there. Let's go there.
You want to go there?
Let's go there.
One of our listeners posted this comment. He said, well, what's it like being LGBTQ plus in a Midwest office these days? Imagine the anxiety, having to hide who you are or risk being the topic of an internal political debate. That's tough.
Well, people shouldn't fear going to work. Yet polarization makes basic human identity feel like a political statement, and that is just messed up.
Yeah.
And we've brought too much of this into the workplace, and we've got to fix it.
If someone's personal identity feels like it's a political statement at your workplace culture is not a healthy place.
Let's dive into that one a little more. So, I mean, here's just some simple facts, right? Like LGBTQ employees experience higher stress in polarized environments.
Mm-hmm.
What does that say about the value of your workforce? If you allow that to happen, you're allowing stress, which could, I mean, just look at, let's pull back the business side of it for just a second. Then we'll go to the more human side. You're potentially creating turnover, which increases cost. You're decreasing productivity because you're, high stress means people are going to be more checked out. You're disengaging. You're creating uncomfortable work environments. You're creating toxic culture. That's just the no-brainer business side. On the other side of it, it's a human being, and that's not how we treat people.
Right.
So why do we allow this?
I think there's a lot of leaders and executives who let their personal beliefs influence their corporate culture. And I've worked with clients and worked in organizations that do this really well and organizations that do it really poorly. I've worked with a lot of LGBTQ individuals over the course of my career. Some of them felt very comfortable to be open and honest about that. Some of them worked really hard to hide it. Some of those cultures were very open and welcoming and open-minded. Some of them were very close-minded and almost hostile to that. So I think it is an opportunity for a lot of cultures to look in the mirror and say, are we a safe place for people who disagree with us? Because whether it's LGBTQ plus or something else, if your culture is not a place where people feel comfortable disagreeing with you, you don't have a safe culture. And that is a competitive liability, right? That means that your competitors are going to beat you because they have a better exchange of ideas, better exchange of values than you have, right? You have pushed things out of the conversation that need to be a part of the conversation. And in so doing, you have limited your success. So I believe that the organizations that succeed long term are open to different perspectives, different ideas, different worldviews. Even if you don't agree with them, it's not saying that you agree with them. It's saying that you are open to hearing their perspective in a respectful, professional way. And the organizations that do that are going to win long term.
It's the very simple thing of ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hate,
Mm-hmm.
hate breeds destruction.
Mm-hmm.
It's just learn. And again, you don't have to agree with their, in this case, LGBTQ plus. You don't have to agree with their sexual orientation or want to be it yourself. Just learn from it. You'd be surprised. Right. And at the end of the day, and let's take this to the business side, the quote unquote enemy inside the business is trying to get the business goals achieved, in gaining market share and expanding clients. It doesn't matter what the color of your skin is, your sexual orientation or your gender preference. Like none of that matters when it comes to the goal the company is trying to achieve.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, everybody's a human being and everybody brings unique perspectives to the table. And I think it's just looking at, let's bring it back to what are the goals of the company and who do we need to get there? And I do think this is a level of, I think in the listener, they talked about, LGBTQ in a Midwestern state. Yes, you might have more progressive areas on the East Coast or West Coast, or I think it's even like a younger generation. I think it's just way more accepted in the younger generations versus an older generation. But
absolutely.
I think it's bringing in that's not what we stand for at the business. We're like, our enemy is not each other. Our enemy is our competition, not in a hateful way, but you can also do that negatively as well. But it's bring it back to the mission, bring it back to the core values, and honestly, just learn from one another. Everybody brings a unique perspective to the table. And if you listen to each other and the uniqueness that everybody brings to the table, you might actually make a better product or serve the customer better or find a more cost-effective way to do it. You might just be surprised. And then all this hatred stuff just becomes mute. We don't have to make work suck because of our differences.
I've got another spicy take for you here. If your culture is not open and not receptive to different ideas, different perspectives, different worldviews, I think you've got a culture problem. And I think that is going to bite you in the ass at some point in the future.
1,000%. Now, let's take this a step further. So we've talked about, LGBTQ in the Midwestern part, right?
All right.
Let's take this because the listener gave us very good points. They're talking about government workers caught in the crossfire. Right now, you have a large number of government workers that are literally at the mercy of the political divide.
Oof.
So what about these government employees and contractors every administration flip brings massive shift. Imagine working under policies you deeply disagree with constantly.
You know, it's interesting. I was talking to a former client, current prospect, guy that I'm hoping to sign a deal with later this year. And he says, you know, it's interesting whenever they're in the mass transit industry. And he says, whenever a Republican president comes in, funding for mass transit goes down and ridership goes up. And I was like, are you serious? And he's like, I've been in this industry for 30 years. Like, that's the trend and everybody knows it. I was like, that's really sad. I am sure that, you know, he's kind of second order effects of government decisions. But I can't imagine how much government employees feel politically weaponized, trapped in these policies. You know, they've all got their own personal values and opinions. How do you create a workplace that shelters people from that?
I just want to hang on for a second. I got to go back to the statement you said. So when a Republican president is in office, funding for mass transit goes down, but ridership goes up. So that must mean the inverse. When a Democratic president is elected, funding goes up and ridership goes down?
That's what he said. And again, this guy's he's worked for large metropolitan mass transit organizations and organizations that are service providers, technologies, hardware, software services, etc., to large metropolitan mass transit organizations. So I'm pretty sure the guy knows what he's talking about.
So I want to use that for a second and go how the polarizing of just the left or the right can impact. So if your job is to maintain and drive, you know, public awareness of mass transit and this, that, and the other, your dynamic totally changes depending on what president. And if you're the construction company that has all the construction workers and the stuff that do these big infrastructure projects, you're impacted just by a political stance. And so I think that's where that political part can play into it. But let's talk about the government workers right now. You've got Doge coming in and just annihilating. And I mean, how about you go to the people that disagree with all of this, that work with these different agencies? How about the executives and VPs in these agencies that are being forced to comply with it? Now, I think there's a level of some of this is good and some of this is bad, and I think a healthy dose of it, but I don't think we're doing it right. I mean, go back to our Doge episode from a few weeks back, and you can get the whole dive on that one. But I do think we're turning the workplace from the government standpoint. I mean, here's the spicy take: politicians treating government workers like pawns, and guess what? Workplaces are not chessboards; these are real lives.
Yeah.
We've got to be aware of how we're impacting lives. And this is not about a political game, you know, a who's is bigger contest on the left or right. These agencies. Now, again, I'm all for efficiencies. I'm all for streamlining. I'm all for making things better and evolving, taking legacy programs that are 50 years old and evolving them to today's form. Like, there's going to be disruption with that. But I think using our governmental workforce as political pawns, it's just not right.
I was at a CEO roundtable group near the DC area a couple of weeks ago, and most of the executives in the room were talking about the fact that it feels like 2008. Like, it feels like nobody knows what's going on. And this is specifically in the DC area. But there is just so much uncertainty, so much anxiety, so much chaos that people just feel paralyzed right now. Like, business owners and decision makers feel paralyzed because there's so much uncertainty in the world right now. And it is a tough place to be in the face of kind of government instability and all of the changes that are happening politically right now. Whether you think they are good or bad, put that to the side. It is creating chaos.
So if you're a VP in a government role right now, what's your advice to them? How can you make work not suck for your people? There's a level of out of control that you can't control the politics that go on. But what if you're a VP within a federal agency, federal organization, what can you do right now?
I mean, I would love to hear your advice. Here's what I would say. I would say be honest about what you know and what you don't know. I would say be transparent about the various scenarios and say, here's the different ways that this can play out, right? Best case, worst case, most likely case. So that your people can begin making plans, because this is what's so hard, is that this affects people's livelihood. It's not just a P&L. It's people's families. It's the ability to pay your mortgage. And the real estate market in DC right now is just chaos, because people don't know if they're going to be able to pay their mortgage over the next 90 days. So I think transparency and helping people think through, where are we right now? What are the range of scenarios? What's the most likely scenario? And then helping people develop their next best option. Because what I'm hearing is that as a lot of federal funding is moving out of the government, that funding doesn't disappear. It goes to the states. So if you're a federal employee, the budget for your head count isn't gone necessarily, maybe not, but look at the state levels and begin to explore, are there opportunities emerging at the state level that might be a good career transition for you, because those federal funds aren't going to exist going forward.
So I agree on this, but let's bring this back to the politics in the workplace. Because I think you're talking about like the impacts of Doge, which I agree with, but like, what can we do, Doge components aside, what can we do for minimizing the political impact within the workplace? Knowing that you may be working, maybe you yourself and or your direct reports or your entire downline are working, could potentially be working for on projects that go against their political belief, or vice versa. They go for, and you've got a clash.
Yeah, implementing policies that you don't agree with.
Here's my take. Is one,
Right.
I think definitely from the Doge side of it, what you're talking about, I think everything was solid. I would say you got to bring it back to the mission of the agency. What is the core mission of the agency? And technically, a president can say all he wants on, X or news, but at the end of the day, these agencies are written into law to do a function. And you got to take it back to, what is the function that the agency is there to serve? And yes, you may have a directive that's a little left or a little right, but at the end of the day, that agency exists to serve a purpose. And I think the more you can leave the personal politics outside of the equation and down to what is the agency's mission that we're trying to achieve and how can we do it with the directive we've been given, I think you'll find that you can kind of set aside the differences and keep back to the mission. Because I'm willing to bet, just because somebody doesn't like the how Congress or the Senate or the current president is, when we actually look at our differences political, they're so minute on the macro level that at the end of the day, we're pretty much wanting the same thing. It's just we might have a nuance on how we want to do it. So get back to the original mission of the agency and focus on how you can implement the current directive that serves the agency's mission, as opposed to being pissed off with what the current president has decided and then, sit back and do nothing about it. It goes back to core values and mission.
Yeah, I think that is true for both government agencies, and then also the second and third order effects, right? The organizations that serve the government, the organizations that serve the organizations that serve the government. I mean, it is a massive web of companies. And I think this is a little bit of a reality check to say, all right, why do you really exist? Right? Booz Allen Hamilton, massive consulting organization. Most of their revenue comes from the government. They are on notice right now because of all of the Doge cuts. But why do you guys really exist? And where can you really add unique value? We've got to remind ourselves of that and dial back into that, because we could have lost sight of it, right? It's easy to take money for a project that's not quite on mission, right? Not quite serving our purpose. And this is going to be a little bit of reality check for them to say, all right, what is it that you really do that adds unique value? And I think that is an important call for every organization in that value chain to say, all right, why are you here? And what is it that you need to do to deliver the value that your organization exists to deliver?
Yeah, and again, I want to take this, get it into the political parts. It's when you're in those conversations, everything we just said is very easily said. I think it's harder to do in practice. And I think it's when you get into a meeting and, Bob sits in there and is like, well, Jim over there is a Trumpster, so we're not even going to get this done. What are you accomplishing with that? I think what we're trying to get to is we can make work not suck by not letting our political bias come into the workplace. And again, what I'm trying to do is divide, not between not having conversation. It's not like all politics stuck at the door and we never talk about it. It's having healthy rules around it, or talking about how it can move the mission forward. Because if someone comes in and says, oh, that guy over there is a Biden loving hippie, well, just an insult.
Right.
But, well, I guess at one point, when did it become an insult?
I don't think you're a Biden loving hippie anymore. You're a Kamala hippie now, but yeah, whatever
it may be. Of course, the other thing is like, when, at one point, was it bad to support a president? Like, when in our history has it been a bad thing to say I support a president? So there's so many things wrong with that. But I think it comes down to when you start using a prejudice against somebody because of their political view, or because your political view and the current circumstance, that is what we have to eliminate. Now, I think in those situations, you could be like, all right, well, you say I'm a Trump supporter. So what do you think that, like, turn it around? Like, start the dialogue, be curious, have conversation. Because again, at the end of the day, what you're going to find out is we really don't agree or disagree that much. It's just nuances. And of course, it gets spun by the media. It gets inflated. Again, media, they're getting eyeballs for ad dollars. We all know headlines, dramatic effects sell. So let's just be human. And I'm not saying leave the politics at the door. What I'm saying is leave your prejudice at the door and have healthy conversation about the political landscape. And you can actually make work suck less, because you're not demoralizing people if they disagree with your stance.
Yeah.
That's key.
I would encourage people to be curious. I think many of us have assumptions around what our coworkers think and believe. And sure, if you're rocking the MAGA hat, you're kind of declaring to everybody who you are and what you believe. But it is surprising to me how many people do not believe what I think they believe. And I think that it is a very good habit to go in with a posture of curiosity and ask people what they think, right? And again, this is tricky. This is tough. It's very charged. And so I'm not saying pick a fight with your coworkers, but I think there's a lot of goodwill to be built in having conversations with your coworkers and just seek to understand what they think, what they believe. Because odds are you might not be correct in thinking what they believe is true, right? And I'll tell you the story, right? I don't think you've ever heard this one before. So many years ago, I had a coworker, a female coworker, former model, married woman, asked me to go to a movie with her.
I'm wondering where this one's going. I mean, you see that well. Model, married,
Yes.
movie. All right, where are we going here?
Model, Russian immigrant model, English is her second language, asked me to go to a movie with her.
Oh, so many stereotypes could be made right now.
So many stereotypes.
All right, keep going.
And I said, hey, I really appreciate you asking. Really enjoy hanging out with you. I just don't think your husband would be okay with that. And she says, no, he's totally fine. You're gay, right? And I was like, no. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, that's cool. But I just don't think it's a good idea for me to go out to a movie with a married woman. And so I say that because this was a very conservative corporate culture. I didn't exactly fit the archetype of their corporate citizen. Neither did she, clearly. But she had made an assumption about me. She had assumed that I had particular social, spiritual, beliefs. And I was like, no, sorry. That is not actually who I am. And I say that because I think it is an opportunity for people to be curious and to say, hey, I know this is dangerous. I know this is sensitive. I would love to hear what you think about this. And I'm not going to argue with you. I don't want to try to convince you. We might agree. We might disagree. I don't know. But I would love to hear, based on your experience in life, how are you seeing this? What are the good? What are the bad? And in that moment of vulnerability, I think we have a chance to build a bridge with people, a bridge to people that might not agree with us. And there's things that you're going to learn from them you might not agree with, and that's okay. But I think there's an incredible opportunity for us to become better humans by just asking, hey, how do you see that? How do you see that press release? What is it that jumps out to you when you look at that video or when you read that article? What jumps out to you? Because we don't ask that question very much. We assume we know. And speaking from personal experience, there's a lot of people who have assumed things about me that are not true. So I would encourage every one of us to take a posture of curiosity and engage your coworkers in this conversation, not in a judgmental way, but in a curious way.
So all I got to say that is, amen, Reverend Steer. Amen, Reverend Steer. Mr. Steer.
Sorry, I am not gay, and my dad's a pastor, so that comes somewhat genetically.
I was about to say, you never denied being gay in that whole thing, so.
I've been married for 15 years to a beautiful woman. We have 2 boys, so you can draw your own conclusions.
There you go. All right, so let's move on to this one. Xenophobes and workplace anxiety. So I think a lot of what we've said applies here, but here is where the listener brought in. The listener mentioned that being Native American and hearing colleagues casually advocate for deporting long-term residents. They said, this isn't just politics. It's straight up toxic.
Yeah. Man, that is tough. When xenophobia becomes office chatter, morale's just going to plummet. But Ryan, I would be curious, do you think companies have a responsibility to police these conversations, or does that just kind of open up Pandora's box?
You know what? I'm gonna pull up. There's a company I work with, and I'm gonna just read off their core values real fast because I think, I mean, these are good, but I think they're indicative of a lot of companies' core values. So let me find the document here. Here we go. Okay, so there's some definition behind these core values, but the main core values are passionate to serve, keep innovating, pursue excellence, win together, and get stuff done. Pretty good values. Pretty good
I like
values.
that.
Now, where is talking about deporting your colleagues, passionate to serve, winning together? I mean, maybe getting stuff done. Yeah, speed up the deportation, get it done. Maybe, but where is winning together in that one? Where is passionate to serve? Where is the innovation in that? And so I think if you actually looked at the core values of a company, and I think this applies for every topic we've talked about so far, like that's just not healthy to talk about. Now, granted, I think when you talk about, and maybe I'm making a little bit of a political statement here, I'm not meaning to, I don't think anybody is arguing for keeping the wrong people out of the country, or, the drug dealers and rapists and the people that need to be managed, whether that's, prosecuted and judged for their crimes or deported or whatever that may be.
Right.
But I think when we're talking about the average hardworking, whether you say American that is a, natural citizen, or it is a person that's been here for years, I don't think it's just, as the person said, it's not just politics. It's straight up toxic to be talking about kicking people out of a country that doesn't make sense. Now, again, there are issues with our political system. I agree with we should fix. There needs to be processes and systems and tools and things to make it easier and more effective, so people don't have to do it illegally. It needs to be harder for the people that are illegal. Like, again, I don't think anybody is against reforming the system, but I think when we go in the mindset of like mass deportation because of a xenophobic mindset, that's just not beneficial to anybody.
Yeah, so I'll give you a spicy take. I think if workplace xenophobia isn't uncomfortable, you've got a culture of toxic waste. Leaders need to clean that up, or their best talent is going to leave.
Think about this. Top talent are people that are going to be hardworking, respectable, do the right thing, good human beings. And if you're encouraging a workplace of toxicity where you're making fun of people, don't get me wrong, I get office banter. I love the joking and stuff like that.
Sure.
But when it's at the expense of the other person, that's no good. And so you're right. You're going to lose your top talent. Or if you are the top talent, you're probably looking at how to get out of that toxic workplace, because it's just not right. It's
top talent wants to get shit done, regardless of your skin color or beliefs. If skin color or beliefs shape your ability to get stuff done in your organization, then expect top talent to leave. So how does this connect to the vision, journey, culture results? Right? Like we've talked about that in a lot of different situations. This one might be a little harder to connect to.
I think this is going to be it's going to be easy for us to say what we're about to say. I think it's the application. It's going to be hard, but you got to be disciplined to the follow through of the application. I mean, first you start with the vision. You got to create the clarity around the valuables of respect and inclusivity, politics aside, right? It's got to be tied back to, what's the vision, and get clarity on the values. 2, we got to train managers to navigate sensitive conversations and ensure emotional safety. Now, we are human. We're going to make mistakes, and people are going to say things. I was on a company meeting earlier today where somebody said something totally out of innocent, And everybody was like, and he was like, oh, my bad. I didn't mean that. Like it was actually kind of funny. And the person that was set in didn't even take offense to it because we knew the environment and everybody knew how to manage the sensitive conversation.
Sure.
I'll give you the example. An individual was he was audio only on Zoom, so his box was black with the name in white letters, and it was a black individual, and you had a senior leader in the organization. He's like, "Oh, you're black. You must be in the car." What he meant was your box is black, not you are. I totally didn't mean it that way, and we had a good laugh about it, and everybody knew it was innocent. So I think it's one of those, again, I think training managers to navigate sensitive conversations and ensuring emotional safety, I think that's also creating emotional safety. If someone makes a statement like that out of pure innocence, don't get retaliation. Now, if they mean it, and if they actually mean what they're saying, yes, go to HR, file the complaints, do those things. But I think we need a healthy level of emotional intelligence and create those emotionally safe environments. And I think managers need to be trained to have those conversations. I think
managers need to invest emotional relational capital so they can afford to bounce those kind of checks, right?
Yep.
Like you spent time listening to somebody, asking them open-ended questions, not judging them, hearing where they're coming from, hearing their experience. You can make those kinds of mistakes and get away with it. And I'm not saying I'm not encouraging those, but you've got enough capital in the bank to bounce a couple of checks and still be okay. If you haven't made that investment relationally, those kinds of errors are going to create relational bankruptcy.
Yep. Here's another one. On the culture side, actively reinforce respect and discourage discourage political toxicity. I'll give you for example. If there is if you've come to a level of standing, and I'm like, we know Bob's a Trump supporter and we call him a Trumper and we're like, hey, Trumper, what do you think? Well, haha, this is what I think. And it can be, you can have a level of interdependence where it can be not insulting.
Sure.
But I think when that turns into, well, because he's a Trumper, I'm not even going to bother working on it. So I'm just going to sit here in silence. Like,
yeah.
I'm not encouraged for calling people Trumpers or whatnot. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying is like, you've got to, you can't have the toxicity of the political side of it. And you've got to actively shut down and discourage and reinforce the respectful sides of it. Again, you can have healthy political debate. If you're curious on both sides and you want to see each other's sides, seek to understand. I think that stuff is okay. It's when it turns into the political divide or the political toxicity, or you start siloing or et cetera. That's the stuff that's got to be shut down. Not saying no politics whatsoever. You can't avoid the problem. You need to manage the problem.
If your company only wants to exist for the next 90 days, then zoom in on the current political administration. But if you want to exist for years, decades, or even centuries, you need different perspectives. And you're going to need the ability to flex back and forth between those perspectives, right? If you're successful today because you get rid of everybody who believes one thing and hire only the people that believe the other thing, you're going to get your ass kicked in the next season, right? Whatever that season is, whether it's 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, 16 years, whatever, right? So healthy, effective, successful organizations long-term have both perspectives, and they build a culture that enables them to work together. And so I think it's important to understand where are we leaning today? Where's the political environment? What can I learn from you about what that means? But then also maintain my personal beliefs about the world. And who knows? And at some point in the future, that's going to become the trend. And we've got to be able to work together through the ups and downs of those changes. And that's really what successful organizations do. They don't polarize one way or the other, because if you do, the life cycle of your business is only going to be the life cycle of the current administration.
Very, very true. Very true. Align your vision and culture to the business, not to the political landscape. And the last one
Absolutely.
here, results. Measure cultural health. Politics should never trump, no pun intended, productivity. Measure your culture's health. When you see the decline, step in and start navigating the vision culture component.
Yeah. When polarization sets in, focusing on a shared vision can stabilize the workplace. It can stabilize the journey, and a strong culture will yield healthy results, even if they have different perspectives personally.
So I got a spicy take for you.
All right.
If your company can't handle political differences internally, how can they possibly handle actual business problems externally?
Ooh, that's so good. I read a couple of books from Jack Welch, who was the kind of famous CEO of GE in its heyday. And he said, no idea will survive the real world if it can't survive a rigorous debate internally. And I think it's a very similar idea to what you just said, right? If we can't handle disagreements internally, we're never going to succeed externally. And if you've got an idea that somebody else can poke holes in, it's just not going to survive in the real world.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah. Jack's good.
All right, let's move on to, we got some actionable advice. So
All
what
right.
can you do today to depolarize your workplace? There's 5 things we can start with. I'm going to hit these 5 and we'll go through them. All right. So the first one is lead by example. Second one is encourage empathy. Third, political clarity. I want to get to that one. 4, support structures. And number 5, open dialogues. So let's start with number 1, lead by example. Set the standard for respectful dialogue. Where does that start?
I think it's important to show how you interact with somebody that you don't agree with, and how you respect somebody when you might not agree with them. And that is a really hard thing in culture today. We don't do that well, but I think leaders have an opportunity to model that behavior and say, hey, I hear you. I understand what you're saying. I might not agree with you, but I appreciate you sharing your perspective. And that framework is going to build a healthy culture for people to understand and yet still disagree.
So a little bit of a trick question is, lead by example. A lot of people think, well, that's the leader's job. And it is. It's why it's called lead by example, but it's up to each individual to lead by example. Even among your peers, someone has to lead by example. And if you can lead with respectful dialogue, you'll be surprised on how many people follow you. Now, not everybody is going to. There's always going to be the one or two that stick out. But again, that turns into a different problem. So it's not just expect the leaders to solve the problem. It's everybody needs to lead by example. No one's exempt. All right. Number 2, encourage empathy. So it says here, promote conversations about personal experiences, not just politics. Go.
That one's tough. I'm not always great at this, but I try to ask 3 questions before I make any statements. So if somebody's sharing something with me, I try to ask, interesting, tell me more. Why do you believe that? Why do you think that happened? What do you think was the cause of that? Like, ask 2 to 3 questions that allows them to share more before you share your opinion. And again, I don't do that perfectly. But when I do that well, I find that I build better relationships. I'm more empathetic to the person that I'm talking to, and I actually learn more. And so rather than arguing with somebody about why they're wrong and why they don't get it and why they're stupid and all that kind of stuff, just ask 3 questions before you give your opinion on the topic. And I bet you will learn more and be a better coworker because of it.
Well, I think this also parallels with one of the 7 habits from Stephen Covey: seek to understand before being understood. And he also says our freedom lies between stimulus and response, because you have the freedom to choose your response. And I think anything, especially in a political conversation, anything that triggers you, if your first thing is to defend, I think you've already missed the mark, because you're
Right.
giving them your freedom. Your freedom is to choose your response. And I would say then follow up with those questions. And you might be surprised if, instead of getting pissed off, seek clarity, ask one of the questions you just did. You might even change the entire dynamic of the conversation. So
yeah, those open-ended questions, close-ended questions can be answered with a yes or no. Open-ended questions can't be answered with the yes or no. So it's, why do you believe that? What happened that made you think that? If they can answer with the yes or no, you're probably not asking the best question. And so challenging yourself to say, how can I ask an open-ended question to this person that I might not agree with, but I would love to understand more of why you think that way?
All right. Number 3, political clarity. Develop clear guidelines around workplace conversations. I think this is just defining the journey, defining the expectations, what we tolerate, what we don't. Plain and simple. You want to have a healthy debate about politics, you can do it, breaks and whatnot, but we don't bring we don't bring opinionated politics into business decisions.
I think saying we don't bring politics into business is a stupid thing to say, because politics affect business. So you can't have a conversation about the future without talking about tariffs right now. Now, I'm not saying tariffs are good or bad. Trump's great. Trump's the Antichrist. Like, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we have to be honest about the fact that this is reality. So it is challenging, but I think vitally important for executives to define the difference between scenarios and personal beliefs. I would love for you guys to have a personal belief conversation at lunch, at drinks, after work, whatever you want. But when it comes to the impact to our business, we've got to be honest about what could or could not take place here and what our reaction is to those events as a business. And we need to be able to separate those, right? Like those, they're related. I get that. But we need to be able to separate them if we're going to have healthy and productive dialogue.
All right. Number 4, support structures. Offer support groups or employee resources for marginalized workers. I think it kind of goes into a lot of what you were just saying.
Yeah. I think understanding which direction your organization leans and who's going to feel left out. And how do we support the people that feel left out and make them feel that they're still valued, their perspective still matters, that we still want them as part of this conversation, even if the majority of the people in the room don't agree with them. And that's a really hard thing to do, but I think it's vitally important, because anybody who who goes all in to either extreme is going to lose in the long run. You might win in the short term, you're going to lose in the long run. And so having a more balanced perspective on your industry, on your business, on what's going on in the world right now is going to be a more effective long-term strategy. But one of the risks is that you end up losing the people who don't agree with the senior leader. And I've seen this in so many organizations where a senior leader has a strong opinion about something, rather right or left, whatever that might be. And everybody else who disagrees with them leaves. And that organization suffers because the alternative perspectives are no longer represented. So I think it is very, very important for the long-term health of an organization to have people who disagree with the senior leaders, who see things differently, to have support so that they are encouraged to stay and remain vocal in these conversations.
Yeah, and our last one here is, open dialogues. Regularly discuss company values and inclusive openly. I think, again, it just goes back down to the more you can beat the drum of, how your values drive the business forward and the inclusivity of the business, it's just going to flush more of this out. The more you make focus on the values, the more the value or the behavior aligns to the values as opposed to creating anarchy in the business.
Yeah. Totally agree. All right, let's wrap this up. We know politics is messy. Workplaces don't have to suck because of politics. We would love to hear your story. Most of this episode was a response to somebody who posted their perspectives and their experience related to a previous episode. So, how is your workplace handling the political polarization?
Ooh, that's good. And like always, subscribe for more episodes. Share this episode with anybody you think that can find value at it. Share it with the leader, share it with the manager, share it with coworkers, anybody that you believe that can get value from it. And remember, work shouldn't suck because politics do.
Thanks for tuning in. Next week, we will tackle another tough topic to help you and your team thrive, even in the chaos and complication of the world as it is today.
And until next time, let's make work suck less together. Because if we do it together, work will suck less.
Make work not suck.
.com.
Make work not suck. Our podcast that talks about exactly that. Our process, vision, journey, culture, and results. We present real-world business solutions that make the difference. Our goal is to make work not suck. Hosted by Ryan Hodges, co-host Daniel Steer. Join us each episode and make work not suck.